Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Amazon Ads podcast, where we've got our favorite DSP expert, Sam Lee, on for a second time. We did another episode probably close to a year ago. We did
Few years
episode
ago at
one.
that point.
Yeah, it's been a while, but Sam Lee is not only probably the best and most experienced DSP manager, but also the most handsome DSP manager. And Sam, I believe you've done some professional modeling. Is that correct?
Why are we getting into this? Yeah,
On your Instagram, it looked like it.
yeah, I have, but my favorite one's the stock photo shoots because I still show up. I'm in Walmart. I was in a
Oh, nice.
ad. I was in a COVID ad. Just word to the wise, don't do a stock photo shoot because they will use your likeness forever. You don't get paid every time they use it.
Oh, you don't get like a recurring.
You sign your life.
Oh man.
It just shows up.
Oh man.
People see it in the wild. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of like what's that guy? The hide the hurt Harry or whatever, that meme, the dude with like the coffee mug.
Oh yeah.
It's just a stock photo that
Yeah,
is everywhere now.
it's exactly it. I'm glad I haven't been memed in that way yet.
Oof. Maybe we can start it.
Oh
We'll go find the stock photos and meme you. But Sam Lee is currently the vice president of Trivium Co., which is Mina Elias's agency, and we've had Mina on a couple times, and now we're having Sam on a couple times. So excited to have you, Sam. And Andrew, do you have any opening remarks?
Yeah, man. Just excited to have Sam back. He is the foremost DSP expert. We handle all the PPC side of things, but it's always good to bring in other experts and other domains that we may not necessarily be able to speak to as in depth. So Sam's going to be breaking down some really cool concepts today. He's going to be going over some critical mistakes that he finds in a lot of DSP accounts. So if you're running DSP, this episode is really going to be good for helping you diagnose, figure out whether your ad dollars and your budget is properly being distributed, being executed properly within the DSP platform. So a lot of value in here, and excited to really dig into this and see what those key mistakes are.
Yes, and Sam, I believe that you have a presentation for us on what is it, 5 steps to auditing a DSP account?
yeah, 5 or 6. I think I threw a bonus one in here. It's one of those things where fun is an interesting way to put it because it's not fun because these are all mistakes that I see a lot that are cost people a lot of money, but I think learning more about it is fun. So let's dive into this. I'm going to go over 5, maybe 6 mistakes that I see when I audit DSP accounts. And these are all very common. Honestly, unfortunately, a lot of the time auditing a DSP account is very fast because these mistakes are pretty easy to identify. And most of the accounts that I look at have them. So I'll dive in. I think that in order of importance, I'll lay these out. These things are tied together to some degree, but I'll try to make this as digestible as possible. All right, beautiful. So number 1, viewability. This is number 1 for a reason. This is the thing that I see. I'd venture to say probably 90% of the accounts I look at have a viewability issue. So just to give you some perspective on what viewability is, because Amazon DSP is charged on a CPM basis, which is effective cost per mile, which is 1,000 impressions, it's different than PPC world where, of course, things like click-through rate matter, where your ads load matter, top of search matters, but you're not going to pay for the ads unless somebody clicks on them. It's, what
Yeah.
PPC means. In the display world, there are benefits to this cost per 1,000 impression model, but there are also a lot of pitfalls. One of them is obviously viewability. So ultimately what this means is when you load a page, whether it's Amazon, whether it's ESPN.com, whatever it is, ads are going to load. Display ads are going to load. Some are at the top, some are at the bottom. And obviously on a mobile or desktop browser, we're only looking at a certain percentage of the screen at any given time, right? So what happens is if your ads load at the bottom of the page, if your ads load on the side, near the bottom, whatever it is, you're going to get charged for that ad. As far as Amazon or really any other DSP is concerned, your ad's loading, you're getting charged. Impressions are impressions, but not all impressions are actually
Right.
visible. So what happens a lot is brands, agencies, whoever, they'll bid pretty low because if they're trying to get a low CPM and get as many impressions as possible, it's a pretty reasonable thing to test out. However, they don't take viewability into consideration And then what they don't know is that almost all of their ads aren't actually being seen by anyone, yet they're still being charged. So, for example, if you look at an account, it's like, oh, wow, I have a $3 CPM for retargeting. Incredible. We're getting so many cheap impressions. You look at the viewability rate, often, especially on Amazon, that viewability rate will be sub 10%. Meaning, sure, you served 1 million impressions. However, less than 100,000 of those were actually seen, and you were charged for all of the million. So it's something that people really don't look at. And I'm going to touch on the inventory portion of this in a little bit because I think it's really important. But generally speaking, take a look at viewability rates and always set minimums. You can set minimums anywhere from 40% to 70% plus. What this essentially means is it takes the average of a given ad placement on a page, and you'll only bid on placements that over 40% of people see or over 60% of people see or whatever. So the two solves for this: set viewability minimums, bid higher. I almost never look at an account and think that they have a bidding issue and that they're bidding too high, because your CPM is often going to be pretty significantly lower than your bid. And what you're paying for with the higher bid is ultimately prominent placements and bigger ads. Because through Amazon DSP, ads can show all over the place. They can show in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So while it's important to try to get cheap impressions, it's even more important to get prominent top of the page impressions, because that's actually what's going to drive
Yeah.
sales.
I just want to
Go ahead.
interject real quick because I think we talked about this briefly last time, but just to make sure we people who didn't see that episode, there is something called the Media Rating Council, which I don't know, they oversee definitions for digital ads, and they have a standard definition for what counts as viewable, and Amazon uses the same definition, which is at least 50% of the ad's pixels must be displayed within the viewable space of the browser tab. And the time requirement is it must be maintained for at least one continuous second after the ad has rendered. So if someone, scrolls past it for less than a second, or if less than half the ad appears, that would be considered a non-viewable ad. And so on DSP, if you have 0% pixels showing, that's, not viewable, obviously, but Amazon will still charge you for those impressions, which is crazy, unless if you're doing what Sam here is saying, which is to crank up those viewable impressions setting for your DSP campaigns.
Quick question, Sam. So you kind of broke this down. There's a lot of different ways you can set this. From 40%, you set up to 75%. How high do you recommend setting that? Do you recommend just going straight for max viewability, or is there like kind of a sweet spot? Because I'm thinking like I want all of my impressions to actually get as much viewability as possible, and that would kind of lend itself to setting as high as possible. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
there?
My general rule with that is I usually set it to 40 or 50%, but I bid much higher. So what'll happen is if you set it to 40 or 50%, your ads can still be eligible to show like halfway down the screen, right? If you think about the bottom of the screen, that's definitely sub 40% of people are actually going all the way to the very bottom of the screen. So you're negating that by setting 40 or 50 with a higher bid. Usually what you can do is it'll basically make sure you're only showing them about halfway up the screen and higher. And then the higher you bid, the more premium the placements you're going to get anyways. So my minimum threshold, I don't usually use the top one. However, the overall viewability rate that I look for is at least 70, 80, hopefully 90+%. Um, so, and again, I don't think there's an exact correct answer with that. I think that the correct answer is setting a viewability minimum. I see the merit in both. I've tested them all. I usually end up going for 40 or 50 in a higher bid, and we see 75+% viewability. But I think it's important to test both, and every brand's going to be a little bit different depending on the competitive landscape. So there's no real answer to that, but that's my typical strategy. As far as analysis and solution, identifying the causes are always that you didn't set minimums and you're bidding too low. Thresholds, as we just talked about, 40, 50, 60, 70, you can't really go wrong. Just set it and increase your bids. You want to make sure that you're increasing your bids pretty substantially based on your CPM if you weren't previously setting one, because the other risk you run is that if you set these minimums and you don't bump the bids up, your ads just won't serve and they'll get deprioritized. And that happens a lot. But the other thing, the other important one that I want to talk about, that I'll dive into this a little bit with the inventory stuff as well, but breaking out your targeting by inventory type as it relates to viewability. It's one of the most important reasons for that. So I'll cover that when I go over the inventory stuff, but it's one of the, even if somebody's aware to look for viewability as a general metric, the inventory component of it is kind of the next layer of that. A lot of the time, and this has changed a bit because Amazon has taken steps to make the DSP interface a little bit simpler. Just by, you used to have different line item types for mobile versus desktop versus mobile off Amazon, and it kind of forced you to separate these things. Because if you wanted to run, for example, mobile app off Amazon, it had to be a separate line item because you can't target both from within one line. DSP has rolled out updates to make it simpler. There's just a basic line item type. You can opt into desktop and mobile. You can opt into apps off Amazon, whatever it is. And by default, you target everything. And that's incredibly problematic because your bidding and targeting strategy for on versus off Amazon should be different. Generally speaking, Amazon's going to be a lot more expensive for CPMs, but people are higher intent on Amazon because they're there to shop. Versus if you're targeting the same people when they leave Amazon, whether they're reading a blog or watching sports highlights or whatever it is, you're reaching the right person, but they're not there to shop. So the conversion rate's typically just lower. And there's a time and place for off Amazon as well. I do a lot of it. However, it's just the bidding strategy and the KPIs need to be a little bit different. So I usually will bid at least twice as high for on Amazon when compared to off for a given targeting strategy for that exact reason. And when you don't break these out, the other thing that people are missing is they don't know without looking in their inventory reports where their ads are showing, if they're showing on Amazon, if they're not. All they know is that they're seeing a pretty low CPM, they're getting a ton of impressions, maybe they're getting a good ROAS, but what they don't realize is that based on their bidding strategy, 90% of their ads are actually going off Amazon. So they're not really doing much, if any, Amazon advertising at all, which is problematic. And tying this back into viewability, this is, if somebody doesn't have a viewability issue, like if you look high level, advertiser order level, your viewability rate might be 75%, which is healthy, fine. But then you go to the inventory report, and because you're not bidding high enough and you're not setting these minimums, your off Amazon viewability might be 95%. Your on Amazon is 5%. But in aggregate, because so many more impressions get served off Amazon, your viewability rate looks good in total, so you don't realize there's a problem. So the main issues that I see, for one, it all comes down to bidding higher on versus off Amazon. That's the long and the short of it. But when people don't break these out, what always happens is it's either no ads are being shown on Amazon or no ads are being seen on Amazon when they're actually showing. And they're lighting money on fire. Because if you're spending any amount and you have 5% viewability rate, you're just serving invisible ads all day, and it's completely pointless. So yeah, breaking those out is incredibly important. So I think that the way that I usually do it is Amazon's owned and operated inventory is consistent of Amazon, IMDb, Twitch, Amazon digital signage, which now you can have basically digital billboards in Whole Foods. And then there's Amazon Publisher Direct and then third-party exchanges. I break it out as on versus off Amazon. Sometimes I'll break out Alexa as well, which is incredibly impactful. But you just want to make sure to separate these things. It just keeps your metrics cleaner. The bidding should be different, and you don't want to allow Amazon to make all of these decisions for you, which is ultimately what happens when you combine all these things.
Makes sense.
Quick question on that. So let's just say you're an advertiser, you're just getting started in DSP, you're spending 5, 10, 15,000 a month on DSP to kind of test things out. Where are you trying to put that budget? What kind of allocations? Is it you just trying to focus that on Amazon placements? Are you kind of branching in a little bit of that budget to off Amazon placements? And yeah, how would you allocate that?
I always start only on Amazon and potentially Alexa as well. So Alexa ads are incredible. They take up the Alexa home screen viewability rates like 100%. They work. I run those out of the gate every time. And on Amazon, yeah, I'll send you guys an example or two of how they look. They're killer, and they always do well.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day about that, and they were seeing, we work together on one account, you and I, Sam, and they were saying they were seeing those ads on their Alexa device or whatever, and like the whole screen was completely covered with that ad, and like they couldn't even get it like click off of it without actually clicking onto it. So a little bit of a hack there, I think.
It's very disruptive. I'm a big advocate for those. I really nerded out when they rolled that out and I saw what the ads looked like. I actually will all often break out Amazon Alexa, and I bet even higher on Alexa because the ads are just so disruptive and in your face. From a consumer perspective, I don't know, but from an advertiser's perspective, it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
this is why I'm
So,
I'm nervous about,
uh,
like, once we start putting, like, Neuralink chips into all of our brains, we're gonna be getting ads just, like, streamed to your head. There's actually
you're going to be
there's
driving
a Black Mirror
blindly.
episode on that. I'm not sure if you've seen that in the latest season. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess to finish the answer to that question, so I start on Amazon and Alexa, and then usually about the 2 or 3 week mark, what I'll do is, I mean, in a week I'll adjust bids. 2 or 3 weeks I'll turn off the non-performers and try some additional launches. And what I do is I'll identify the highest performers based on our KPIs, and then I launch them off Amazon. So let's say we're running, retargeting, similar product views, and like contextual category, whatever it is. I'll launch the highest performer or two performers off Amazon, bid much lower, and then see how those do. Yeah. And then that's kind of an ongoing thing. So usually like the ratio when you're fully up and optimized on versus off Amazon is like 75-25 in favor of Amazon. So yeah, the like prove the concept on Amazon and then launch it off.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can definitely see how just being on Amazon, having most of those ads display on Amazon is much more relevant to the customer, how they're shopping, and a lot closer to that buying decision. So
Yeah.
makes total sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like people are there, right? And the other benefit is because everything's so Amazon branded, even when you are serving them off Amazon, you're targeting Amazon customers, right? And it has an add to cart button, it has the Prime badge, it has the photo with responsive e-commerce. So it's just a much more clickable type of display ad compared to just the general banner ads you see on the internet that like nobody wants to click. But yeah, I've talked on all this already, but make sure it's broken out, bid accordingly. I put 100% to 200% higher for on Amazon. Like as an example, for retargeting, I'll often bid as high as like $10. If I was doing it off Amazon, it'd be closer to 5 or 6. Cool. Next one is low new to brand purchase rate. And this obviously isn't relevant for brands that just have a non-repurchasable product and only one product. But I see a ton of, especially brands in the CPG space, where they're running a lot of retargeting, they're running a lot of loyalty, they're running, high ROAS, high intent uh, line items. And then if they look at their new to brand purchase rate or their percent of purchase coming new to brand, rather, it's often in the single digits. So are a number of these sales incremental because people might not have come back? Absolutely. And cross-selling, I think, is incredibly valuable. So if you're a supplement brand and you take purchases of your protein and show them your amino acids, absolutely, those are valuable tactics. And that percent of purchase coming new to brand will be zero because they bought a different product from your brand. That being said, it's a KPI to keep eyes on, just because one of the bigger questions about Amazon DSP is the potential cannibalization of organic sales, right? And obviously, that's more of a concern when you're doing a lot of lower funnel tactics. But one way to mitigate that, especially for a CPG brand, is how many of the purchases are coming new
Mhm.
to brand. If a high percentage are coming new to brand, we can say with a lot more certainty that we're driving incremental sales compared to if we're just doing all loyalty and retargeting. It's beneficial, it's efficient, but you always run the risk of serving ads to somebody that was going to buy anyways.
I think that's one of the huge benefits of DSP is being able to adjust those past purchasing audiences. Back when Andrew and I were managing this large toy brand that was spending like $500,000 to $1 million a month on PPC, what we would see is we would just take like the highest funnel keyword we could think of. It was just like toys, exact match, sponsored brand ad, and we would have like a 35 to 40% um, new to brand rate, or no, it was less than that. It was like 20 to 30% new to brand rate, which was crazy, right? So we're like 80% of these sales, yeah, are returning purchases on Toys Exact Match. But the reason why it's because Amazon, the search algorithm will prefer every user gets a different user experience based on your past shopping. Yeah. So when I go on Amazon to search like creatine, I'm always going to see, I think it's optimum nutrition, like first,
Yeah, I see it all the time. The purchase
Exactly.
before. That's a good point.
Yeah, being able to sometimes it's difficult to scale new to brand on search because Amazon's gonna continue showing you to past purchasers, but that's where DSP can be hugely helpful.
That's a really good point. It's like the YouTube algorithm thing, right? Where people become so radicalized because they just keep getting served more things similar to what they've been seeing before. And it is ultimately a good user experience. Like there's a reason why they do it, but it is something to take into consideration every time. So that's a great point. And then to solve for this, right? So the easy one is just look at it as a percentage and then put money into what's driving hopefully a pretty efficient return, but also has a high percentage of new to brand. This varies pretty heavily from brand to brand, but just a general example is for the bottom funnel stuff. If you aim for 25 plus new to brand, because you have to factor in things like cross selling, and then for acquisition campaigns, at least 75%. That's just an example, but it's just good to set whatever your goal is, right? Um, and then the segmentation thing again. So there are benefits to running like a singular order and have all your line items in that because the budget will favor your KPIs and the overall performance will improve. But if you have particular goals outside of something like plain return on ad spend, segmenting things by funnel stage. So if you are focused on new to brand, you can put the budget in the mid funnel versus the bottom funnel. That's always helpful. And then purchase negations. So Andrew and I had worked a bit on this sort of thing recently. And if one of your main KPIs is new to brand, you can do something like make a purchase audience for all of your products, 365-day look back, and negate anyone that's purchased your product for those particular types of line items and negate that. So will you lose out on potentially increasing some LTV for customers? Yes, but you can be pretty definitively focused on new to brand customers by
Uh-huh.
doing that.
Yeah, that's such a valuable tactic or just implementation that people should be making within those mid-funnel audiences in particular, just making sure there's not any bleed over of past purchasers coming through there, and just making sure that you're hitting that right audience that you're trying to reach, like your mid-funnel is trying to go after and capture those net new customers. And I've definitely seen a lot of accounts where they've neglected that negation of past purchasers, and it looks like everything's performing well, but if you kind of dig down underneath the surface, it's just hitting, it's not incremental to actually reaching net new customers.
Exactly. I see that all the time. And that's something that makes DSP so valuable, right? Is that purchase negation or even view negation audiences. That's pretty unique to it. And I think like the most simple one is, like with retargeting, you negate recent purchases, sure. But there are a lot of ways you can get creative with negative audiences to really hone in on whatever that KPI is you're after. Cool. All right. So this is 4 and 5 underbidding, which I talk about a lot. I guess I just talk a lot about bidding higher because I don't usually see that as problematic as underbidding, but underbidding and audience mismatches, right? So this is something I see across the board. And again, it's going to be very specific to the audience and it's going to be very specific to the placement. So just as a general rule of thumb, you want to look at the funnel from top to bottom, and then your bid strategy is the reverse of that. So the lower the funnel, the higher the bid. Pretty simple. And then on versus off Amazon, like we talked about. So what I'll see a lot is people will set like a $3 bid and they're bidding the same for a lifestyle targeting audience as they are for retargeting. And then either none of their ads are being seen for retargeting or they're not served. So this sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often like blanket bidding strategies are used without taking into consideration the sizes of these audiences. And then the other thing that's just worth looking at, like as we were talking, especially as we were talking about negative audiences, making sure you really understand what and or qualifiers mean. And what I mean by that is an and qualifier means people have to fit both these criteria. An or qualifier means you have to hit at least one of these criteria. So as an example, if you're looking to target a competitor list or a similar product list, whatever it is, if you have an or qualifier, as long as somebody's a competitor or a similar product, they'll be targeted. If you use the and qualifier, they have to fall into both these audiences, which it's either a pretty expansive take on targeting or a very, very refined one. And mixing these up can often make you target literally the opposite of who you want to target. And DSP is they created a flag for this over the past like year because so many people were messing these up, and that's because when you target an audience, like let's say we want to do a retargeting line item, right? And we target 14-day views, but we want to make sure nobody's purchased in the past 90 days. What a lot of people would do is they would create the 14-day view audience, the 90-day purchase audience as a negation, and they'd set an or qualifier.
Mm.
And what that means is if somebody either viewed our product for the past 14 days or they haven't purchased it in the past 90 days, we'll serve them an ad. So essentially, we're serving ads to everyone that didn't purchase your product in the last 90 days, which is almost all of
Mhm.
Amazon. So they've created a flag for that because there were a lot of people that were messing that up and just serving their ads to everyone and getting a terrible return. So there is a little exclamation point that makes it a little bit easier. That being said, it's good to be pretty concise with these things. Um, yeah, and again, the tool as it's become more user friendly, it should hold your hand a little bit more than it used to, but it's always important to dive into these. So yeah, we talked about this stuff, but smaller audience, higher bid, qualifiers, take a look at them, and then set an optimization cadence and stick to it. Because Amazon DSP doesn't need to be adjusted as often as PPC does in terms of things like bids, there's a lot more fluidity with it. Like bidding's important, but once you establish the baseline, it's not like you need to be in there adjusting bids every day, but set a cadence, right? And whether it's 2 days a week, I go in and turn off line items and adjust bids, whatever it is. 1 day a week, I go in for new launches. Just set a plan and stick to it so things don't get lost in the shuffle because it's very easy to rely on Amazon's automation and then you don't know what it's going to do at a certain point. Cool. And then this is the bonus one. This is one I've talked about quite a bit in the past, but merchant token implementation. So another big thing is that Amazon DSP lives outside of Seller Central. Typically, you either have a separate seat, working with an agency or a tech partner as a seat. So there's no direct tie between the ads you're running on DSP and the ads you're running for PPC. I could essentially right now go build an advertiser in our seat and spend money and drive ads to anyone's product I wanted. It doesn't matter. I could drive ads to probably Apple's product if I wanted to do that for some reason.
Would you like to drive some
Just
ads
tells you
to that Amazon Ads podcast?
we could do that. I actually just started running them for some of Mina's stuff through streaming TV. We'll see how that does, but no problem. But yeah, the way that we fix that is it's different if it's vendor central because you won't have a merchant token, but at least for seller central brands, you need to find a merchant token. This is pretty easily findable through Seller Central, or you can even actually get it just through the Amazon platform itself by clicking the sold by button and pulling it from the URL. But this merchant token gets input at the advertiser level within the DSP, and this is how we deduplicate sales attribution between DSP and PPC. So if somebody is introduced to a brand via a DSP ad, and then the last step that they take is they click a PPC ad before purchasing, this just tells DSP not to count that sale as a DSP sale. So if it's tied to a merchant token, this will fix the deduplication of the sales. However, if you're just looking at Seller Central, essentially the sales that are attributed to DSP will look like organic sales, but this helps to make it a lot quicker and it takes maybe 10 seconds. And I see this neglected a lot, either by accident or on purpose, but
Trying to boost
always
those
check for
ROAS
this.
numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I do like to believe that most people that don't do it just don't know about it or there's some circumstance around it, but you never know. And I think it's it.
Awesome. And I've got a couple more questions for you. One is the creative ad types. From my experience and what I've seen, responsive e-commerce, which for those who don't know, looks very similar to like a sponsored display ad. It shows the product, the title. You can make it look a little more like a sponsored brand ad and have some lifestyle images in there. Um, that's kind of the normal that I think most people are using. Probably, I would venture to say around 80% of the spend in a DSP account is going to those ad types. Does that sound about right to you, and is that your recommendation?
Yeah, I'd say unless we're talking about things like video ads, audio ads, obviously that's different. But as far as static display goes, I'm close to 100% responsive e-commerce. Even if there are custom images that we want to utilize, you can add custom images within a responsive e-commerce app. Provided you're promoting your product, you want the Prime badge on there. You want your price. You want your cart button. There are time and place for custom ads, non-responsive. Like if you want to drive to a brand store, that can absolutely be beneficial. But otherwise, oh yeah, other tip with that. I posted about this recently, but one thing that a lot of people don't do is within the settings for responsive e-commerce ads, provided if you were a third-party seller, which if you use a Seller Central account, you are, um, there's a box that you have to check under additional settings that says enable 3P price. And people either don't know about this or I've seen people that are confused about what it is. They think that it means if it's a different seller running the buy box, you can promote to them. It's not what it does. If you don't click that box, your pricing, your Prime badge will not pull in. It'll only pull in your title and the reviews. Pricing, Prime badge, and add to cart button, you need to check that box. And I see conversion rate pretty much double between when you do that and when you don't.
And yeah, talk a bit about those video ads. Are you running those like more on web or on streaming TV? Where have you seen better performance?
Yeah, they're just different use cases, right? Like OLV online video is a much lower barrier to entry and the attribution's a lot cleaner. So if you're looking for something that's going to drive direct Amazon sales, start with that. I usually recommend brands dip a toe in that first. The CPMs can actually be incredibly cheap. You layer in audiences, same way you do with static. You can show them on Amazon. You can show them off Amazon. You can select if you want to do, pre-stream, in-stream. You can set video completion minimums. The OLV online video, in my opinion, is incredibly underutilized and very beneficial. Streaming TV, I would say the same thing about. However, it's just a different set of KPIs because you're showing it on TVs. It technically can be clickable and you can have a QR code, but attribution is never going to be perfect. I think like OLV can be used as a very effective like mid-funnel tactic. Streaming TV needs to be awareness focused.
And then if it's a responsive e-commerce ad, Amazon already you enter the ASIN, Amazon knows the ASIN, so they can attribute the sales per ASIN. If you're doing a fully custom image ad, which means like you created this in Photoshop, it has nothing, you're not taking any content from Amazon. You upload that image and Amazon runs that in the DSP ad. I'm just explaining to users who are unfamiliar. In that case, you can tell Amazon what is the ASIN that you're showing in this image because they don't know by default, so that they can make that association and help track sales per ASIN. Your look is telling me that might not be the case anymore.
So it's tricky because the way that it works is you set up conversion tracking at the order level, right? So which products are we promoting? That's how you factor in product sales and ROAS, and then any other sales from that brand factor into total product sales and TROAS / combined ROAS. The issue is that they don't break out the sales by product. So the only way that I've been able to really do that is if you do have a tech partner, like I've seen it through Backview, I've seen it through Xnerda, where they can give you a product by product breakdown. Otherwise, you're really limited to the sales at the creative level. But it's possible that even though a sale is attributed to a creative for a specific product, it doesn't necessarily mean they bought that product. So that part gets tricky. So at a smaller scale, it doesn't matter that much because you're usually like if you're spending 5K, 10K a month, you're usually not advertising a ton of products. And you can tell, it's not going to be perfect, but you can pretty much tell if I'm promoting this product, people are buying this product. Once you scale, that's when breaking out by product or at least categorically becomes really helpful because then you track ROAS and product sales. You only track sales for those products, and then ROAS total product sales will track other sales. But at a small scale, it does get tricky. So when we look at product sales, I break out all the creatives, at least by product. We see attributed sales based on that, and that's more or less effective. But if somebody clicks on an ad for your protein, goes to your brand store, buys amino acids, that sale is going to be attributed to the protein creative, but it's going to look like a protein sale, provided you're tracking both at the order level.
I mean, things might have changed because it's been like over a year since I've done DSP, but when Andrew and I were doing it, the way it worked was like if you have those custom creatives, and especially like where video with videos, I think is where it'll apply quite a bit. Um, yeah, this it'll say like total sales or whatever attributed to that creative, which includes cross sales, brand halo, everything like that. But if you enter an ASIN, then it will measure separately if it was specifically that ASIN. However, entering in which ASINs, the attributed ASINs, I think it's at the order level. Um, that's something that is a weird permission issue that only like the admin on the account or sometimes what we would have to do is we have to literally email our Amazon rep and say, "Can you please add these ASIN associations?" Yeah.
Yeah, that it's not like if you have a tech partner, often if you don't have admin access, you can't adjust it. But yeah, like with videos and with custom creatives, there's a search function for ASINs and you can add it to tie it to the creative. And for one, it's for a landing page thing. Uh, and two, it associates it theoretically, but it's the order level settings that still dictate the sales that are attributed, right? So like if you zoom out, it's whatever you're tracking at the order level. So like let's say we didn't set up order level conversion tracking. We created a video or a custom creative and tied an ASIN to it. It won't track sales until those ASINs are input at the order level. It's like there's a lot to dissect with it. And that's why in a lot of these instances, like AMC reporting through tech partners that you can't pull from the DSP can provide a lot of guidance on it. And then again, at scale, it's just breaking things out further. So like if you're only tracking one product conversions in an order, then you know where the sales are coming from.
Well, Sam, as we're starting to wrap up here, man, for anybody who's watching that wants to get in contact with you, wants to have their DSP account audited, have you take a look at it, where should they go? How should they contact you?
Yeah. So easy way. So triviumco.com is our website. My email is sam.l@triviumco.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. However, due to the AI messages that I've been getting insane amounts of on LinkedIn over the past year, it might take me a little bit longer to respond on LinkedIn because my message inbox is just worse than it had ever been. But yeah, Sam Lee on LinkedIn, probably a few of us. But all things Trivium, it's pretty easy to get in contact with us.
Yeah. Start if you're sending Sam a connect request or a message and you're sending him a message or doing a connect request with add note, whatever, make sure you type in TAAP for that Amazon Ads podcast. That way he can quickly see, yeah, filter it out a little bit. Well, thanks again, Sam, for everything. And yeah, it's always good stuff learning about DSP. And thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on that Amazon Ads podcast.
Appreciate it, team.